Hi, I'm Carol Fote, and I'm a member of the Logan Tabernacle Concert and Lecture Series Committee. And today I am speaking with Saboor Sahely, and he's going to tell us his story. And the reason these stories are important is because we want to get to know our neighbors. We want to get to know them personally. A lot of people already know your story, and we want to get to know you better. So I'm going to start off with a couple of questions, and we'll kind of see how this goes. I think maybe as we go along, you're probably just going to get in there and tell your story, and I can just sit back and relax.
Makes sense.
Okay. First of all, my first question is, Saboor, how long have you lived in the Valley?
I have lived in the Valley since 1978.
Okay. Now, I did give Saboor a list of questions that we kind of want to have incorporated into this getting to know him. And so I'll start out asking, but you know what? You can just take it away whenever you want to just do it on your own, okay?
Well, thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. So my name is Saboor Sahely. As I said, I've lived in Cache Valley since 1978. I was born and raised in a small village in eastern Afghanistan. Anyway, life was very simple. Things were totally different than what we see here right now, obviously. The memories that I have, the vivid memories, growing up in a little village, very few children were able to go to school. My grandfather took me to the schoolyard, I'll never forget, and kind of to find out whether I'm old enough to be able to start school or not. The memory that I have is that the principal opened my mouth and counted my teeth and decided based on the number of teeth that I've lost that I'm going to be old enough to start school or not. So in a nutshell, I started school in a little fortress, an old house, a little fortress. That was our elementary school. And the things that will be interesting for the children here is that there was no school lunch, there was no food, nothing available. You walked to school every single day. But I'll back up a little bit. The day that I started school, I'll never forget. My mother basically met me at the front door and threw about 2 or 3 pounds of candy all over me, and to celebrate the moment that I was going to be starting school. School was about 35-minute walk, right in the middle of the lush green rice paddies, and all the children walked between these paddies to go to school. And I was very, very scared the first day or two. And then my mother was sit on the roof atop of the house with a green scarf on, and I'll never forget. I'll walk for 2 or 3 minutes and I'll look back to see if she's still on the rooftop or not. She will watch me walk and watch me walk, and eventually she will fade away in the distance. And by then I was brave enough to finish the journey on my own and go to school. As I said, life was very different in the village. We slept on the rooftops. The homes were adjacent to each other, the flat rooftops. The summers were hot and humid, and all the families would sleep on the rooftop. And early in the morning, before the dawn broke, people would get off the rooftop and go back downstairs so they don't want to be seen by the rest of the village. There was a lady next door to us on a rooftop that every night she will talk about her grandson that happened to be in the United States at the time. She would be worried, oh my God, I hope my grandson is okay in the United States, and so on and so forth. So as a child, for the first time, I heard the word the United States through the mouth of the lady next door. And I kept thinking to myself, you know what, maybe someday I work my way to that land there, you know, that magical land called the United States of America. So kind of the seed was starting to be planted in my mind, and I was thinking about that as I was growing up. So the first person that inspired me about coming to the United States was a distant cousin at the time that was going to school in the United States of America. And in the schoolyard, as I said, my mom had a homemade backpack for me with a piece of bread in it, and I'll take that to school with me every single day. During lunchtime, there was a little creek that went to the schoolyard. So everybody would take their food and take some water from the little creek and eat their bread with water from the creek, and that was our school lunch. And I remember that would have been probably the mid 60s, late 60s, that the United States of America sent some powdered milk to the schools. And the custodian will take that powdered milk and mix them in a big, huge barrel with water, and they'll give us a glass of milk every day with our breakfast. And on the bag, there was a handshake, basically, what it said, what Farsi and English is said on it, a gift from the people of the United States of America. And that was the first time that the inspiration even started to grow further. I said, you know what? I've heard about the United States of America. I've heard from the lady on the rooftop every summer night. But here I am, I see it on a bag of powdered milk. And what a nice thing that these people send us, that now we're going to have a glass of milk with our breakfast rather than just plain water from the creek. So that's how the inspiration started about coming to the United States of America.
Actually, it was the powdered milk that and that bag that had the friendship hands on it that really inspired you.
Absolutely. You know, the military power, the might of the United States was not the inspiration. And in all frankness, it was the bag of milk, the act of kindness by the people of the United States that as a child inspired me to one day basically work my way to this part of the world and see that land called the United States of America.
So when did you start getting really serious about coming here? I mean, you probably were you in high school and thinking about was college in your view?
In those days, you know, going to college in Afghanistan was almost impossible. There was only one university in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, and then there was a medical school in eastern Afghanistan. So thousands of high school kids will graduate, and there will only take about 1,000 students to go to university. So college entrance exam was something that it was in your mind when you were like in ninth grade, basically ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. You study like crazy because the pressure was on. Your parents literally will disown you if you flunked that exam because that was your only ticket to get out of the village. So I was one of the lucky ones that I went on and went to college. And when I was a sophomore in college in Afghanistan, there was a program they call it the Fulbright Exchange Student Program. And what they did is they'll take a student from each university, from each college, so to speak, and bring them to the United States for 3 months to live with American families and learn the language and see the culture of the United States. And again, I was one of the lucky ones that from my own college in 1975, the Fulbright Scholars Exchange Program basically picked me as a student from our college. And I came in the winter of 1975, I came to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Oh. And I went to University of Pittsburgh in a language program in that program. And the program ended by the spring of 1975. And then I went home back to Afghanistan. When I graduated from college, my goal was to come back to the United States because I had decided I'm going to definitely come back and pursue my education in the US. And in 1977, I graduated from college in Afghanistan. Military service was mandatory. I finished that, 6 months of that. And after that, I applied and I wanted to go to the University of Pittsburgh. But I had a good high school friend that happened to be here in Logan, Utah, going to Utah State. He came 2 years prior to me. So I wrote to him. Those days, there was no emails or even cell phone didn't exist. So I wrote to him that I'm going to be coming to the United States, possibly to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He recommended, no, for sure, I should come to Utah. Nice people, small town, mountainous, beautiful place. So he sent me an application for admission to Utah State. I'd never heard of Utah, never heard of, the religion here or even the geography of the place. So anyway, I filled out those applications and I sent them. And a few weeks later, the response came and I had admission to Utah State. And so in May of 1978, I departed Afghanistan and on my way to Logan, Utah. And the journey is long because just before I was leaving Afghanistan, a military coup took place. The communists basically overthrew the government in power. It was a nationalistic government in Afghanistan. It was a brutal, bloody coup. They basically overnight executed the entire cabinet. They killed the president, the vice presidents, the president's brother, the president's wife, the president's sons and daughters, and just about the entire cabinet got executed. I think 1 or 2 members that didn't happen to be at the Capitol at the time that survived. So after the military coup, I had to go back and basically get a different stamp on my passport. But thank God I had an American visa in my pocket. The airport was bombed. The runways were not available. And shortly after the runway was fixed, and I got a phone call that the flight will be leaving Afghanistan. And frankly, I was one of the very few lucky people fortunate enough to be able to legally leave Afghanistan on that airplane. So it was a very, very scary, a lot of apprehension, a lot of anxiety when the airplane finally decided to leave Afghanistan. And the government, the communist government, decided they're not going to allow any funds. So they froze all the assets in the banks. I had a couple of $1,000s between my father and grandfather and my uncles and everybody had contributed so they can help me leave. And so they only allowed $400 to get out of the country. And of course, I've said this story before. I took some extra money, I bought it in the black market and put them in a toothpaste tube and basically went to the airport, and the machine guns and bazookas were all over the airport, and they emptied my suitcase and I went through my shaving kit and they opened it. I was scared to death that they're going to open the toothpaste tube. They did not look at that. And basically I left Afghanistan, the plane took off, and I had saw so much devastation. I saw, frankly, body limbs hanging on the trees and hundreds of tanks burned down to the ground in the capital city because of the 24-hour military coup.
Okay.
So, you know what? I was so nervous and scared that even when the plane took off, I thought they're going to basically tell the airplane to turn around and come back. And I vividly remember the pilot announcing, "The ladies and gentlemen, we're entering Iranian airspace," and finally had a sigh of relief. So the plane had to stop in Iran. From there, I had to stop in Turkey. And then I went on to Frankfurt, Germany. We spent the night in Germany, and our flight was the next morning to the United States. And the first thing I did is I took my toothpaste and squeezed it out and into a sink in the hotel room. And I was able to get my money out and wash them and put them aside and dry them. And the next morning there was a flight to New York City, and I saw the skyscrapers of New York from the sky above. And my father could only afford a ticket to New York City, Carol. So when I spent the night in New York, I basically found out what the cheapest way to get to Utah, and Greyhound bus at a coast to coast for $65. And I end up on a Greyhound bus with literally, the cliche is like a shirt on my back, just the shirt on my back and a suitcase, and took a Greyhound bus from New York City to Logan. Finally made it to Logan, Utah. And my friend, who was my high school friend, he basically came to the bus depot and picked me up and took me to his apartment. So that was my journey making it to Logan, Utah.
I want to ask you before we go farther here, how were your parents then with that coup? Did they come through that okay?
My parents survived. We lost many family members through the years. Remember that coup was the beginning of what do you call it, a never-ending war in Afghanistan. You know, as you can see, you know, then the communists took over, and the communists basically got overthrown by the Mujahideen, and then they were overthrown by the Taliban. And of course, the Taliban, contribute to the 9/11 situation in the United States, and then they were overthrown, and then we've had different governments, but the war has been going on. And then after many years, because there was no phone conversation, mail was very scarce. My mother was very sick, and my father got a visa to India to take her for treatment. When they arrived in India, they called me, and I was able to immediately, by then I was a US citizen, so I was able to get a immediate flight to India, and I arrived in India after many years. I saw them in India. And then I went to the US Embassy, and I told the visa officer that my mother was very ill and they were here from Afghanistan. That was in the midst of the communists in Afghanistan. And the visa officer was very kind. They gave them a 3-month or 4-month visa, I can't remember, and I brought them home to Logan. And my mom got some treatment. I was hoping that they would stay, but she was very homesick. Her daughters were there, and kids are all there back home, and she wanted to go back. And then after a little while, they decided to go back. And then when she went back, she passed away in her 60s.
Oh.
And I didn't even know that she has died for many months. And eventually I found out she had passed away. So anyway, so I did see them after that. After my mom passed away, then I brought my father here. So my father lives in Salt Lake with my brother. So through the years, we brought most of the family members except one brother. Several of them immigrated to England, 2 of them in England, and the other 4 are in Utah right now. So 4 of us in Utah, and 2 in England, and 1 in Afghanistan still.
Well, I'm looking at these questions that I had, and your whole story just kind of shifts everything for me.
That's a good plan. So
when you came here, you went to USU, graduated from USU. At what point did you get interested in the restaurant business?
You know, what's interesting, when I got here that night, my friend that happened to be a student at the time at USU, he took me to dinner at JB's restaurant in Logan. And he said, by the way, how much money do you have? And I opened my wallet and I showed him. Remember, I had very little money by the time I paid for the hotel in Germany and paid for the bus and everything else. He says, my goodness, this money doesn't even pay your tuition alone. So I said, what am I supposed to do then? He said, Logan was very, very small. There was hardly anything going on in Logan. He called a friend in Salt Lake City and explained to him my situation. He said, well, send him to Salt Lake and see if I can help him get a job or something. So he put me back on a bus 2 days later, and I went to Salt Lake City, and the other friend picked me up, and I stayed in this basement for a few days, and I applied for jobs all over the place. And that summer, finally, I was able to get a job washing dishes in a restaurant called the Lamb's Grill that used to be downtown Salt Lake on Main Street. So I started working there. Then about a week or two later, I found another job. So nights will work in one job, morning will be another job. So in the morning I'll work, and by 3 o'clock I'll get done with one job. Then I'll run through the Deseret News building behind the Deseret News in the back alleys of Salt Lake and run to the other bathroom and change my uniform. I'll work till midnight in the other restaurant. So I did it all summer long. And my day off, I remember I work in a car wash. So literally all summer. And I was very proud of myself. I was able to buy me a shirt and a pair of pants, and I was able to save $1,600 that summer to come to Utah State. So that fall of 1978, I came to Utah State. When I got registered, by the time I paid my books and tuition and an apartment, I realized most of the money was gone. So I started looking for a job in Logan, but I didn't have a phone or I didn't have a car. I couldn't afford either one of them. So every weekend I'll walk all over town and I check on my applications. Where Angie's is, there used to be a chain restaurant called Sambo's, and I had applied there. So one Saturday morning, I walked in there. The manager said, when can you start working? Because the dishwasher hadn't shown up yet. Apparently it was a no-show. So I said I could start right now. And he grabbed me an apron and put me to work. And I started washing this in the same building in 1978. So I worked there in 1979. They moved me up to become a cook and eventually an assistant manager. And then eventually I became a store manager. When I graduated, I said I will never, ever work in a restaurant again. I had a degree in business and I had a degree in mining and geology from Afghanistan. The dream was that I'm going to combine the two and I'm going to work for a major mining company or oil company somewhere with foreign languages and 2 degrees and so on and so forth. The economy was really bad in 1980 and nothing happened. And in the meantime, when I was a store manager and I was working there as a cook and as a dishwasher, I was dating my current wife. She was a server there. So we eventually, after dating a while, we got married. And then I still said, you know what, I'm not going to work in the restaurant business anymore. Finally, the store manager got fired and I graduated from college. They offered me the store manager's job. I said, okay, I'll take it, but it's going to be a temporary thing. I'm not going to be in this industry. That'll be the last thing I'll ever do in my lifetime. Then in 1981, they needed an area manager in the Pacific Northwest in Washington and Oregon. And they called me and I was like 28 years old. And they doubled my salary and they moved me to the Pacific. And so Angie, my daughter that we named the restaurant, she was about 1 year old. So Christine and I and the baby moved to the Pacific Northwest, got a little apartment there. And I worked for the company for about 1.5 years. They were under bankruptcy. They were under Chapter 11 and they started closing their stores all over the country. My sister-in-law, Christine's brother's wife, Marlene, they were visiting from California. And I told them that, the company is going to be going out of business. I'm looking for other jobs. And then she said, why don't you go back to Logan? That restaurant is closed, is out of business. I even got a name for it, open your own restaurant, call it Angie's. Angie was sitting in a little high chair eating dinner. So we thought about it. We had no money. We just had an old beat up car. And long story short, made several trips to Logan, talked to local banks, and finally, one of the banks, I was lucky enough to basically get a small loan, and we packed our bags and grabbed the U-Haul, and that would have been in 1983. So we moved from Oregon back to Logan, and we rented a little basement apartment just about a block and a half from the restaurant. And we had that basement apartment, and we opened Angie's restaurant, and the restaurant was only half the size. The dining room was half the size, and the coffee shop was half the size. Times are very, very difficult. So frankly, when we lived in that basement, we did not have a bed. We slept on the floor. My car, I did not have car insurance. I was trying to get enough money to get car insurance. Eventually, Christine and I would go there every morning. There was no power. We couldn't afford to turn the power. We'll clean and scrub and clean and scrub. And eventually, when it get dark, then we'll go home. And the next morning, we'll go back and finish. Then I finally took, basically cleaned up and put my shirt and a tie on and went to the job service and interviewed a bunch of people and hired a bunch of servers and dishwashers and cooks. And we had about 15 employees, if I remember right. And so that's how we started it. And eventually, but there were many times that we thought, this is not for us. And I think we should just pack our bags and get another job, work for somebody else. But I kept telling to myself, and I told her that, what? I said, I read somewhere that failure is inevitable in life, but to give up is inexcusable. So I said, we're not going to give up. We're going to continue to work. And eventually, after 5 or 6 years, we're able to get profitable and we're able to hire another manager and then moved on. And here we are. Thank God. We have 80 plus employees, and this is our 38th year in business.
Boy, and the restaurant business of all businesses is a tough business.
It's a very fatal business. Most of them, unfortunately, we've been very blessed to be in one of the best places in the world. Our customers, this became home. The elderly became like my parents. The people of my age became like my brothers and sisters. And this is not a restaurant anymore. I keep saying it's not about pancakes. It's about community. It's about our customers. So this became literally an interesting thing. The restaurant became where they say where the locals eat. This is where people hang out, where people get together. So we've been very, very fortunate and very, very blessed to be able to survive in this very crazy industry.
Was there ever a time that you felt that you were an outsider?
Yes, many, many times. But the beginning was hard. Working for Sambo's, I'll never forget. Those are very difficult times. The restaurant was open 24 hours, and I would be managing Friday and Saturday night, basically from 10 at night to 6 in the morning. And the bar ratios will over. The bars will close up in Logan, and all the drunks will walk into the restaurant. And the unfortunate thing was that the hostages were taking in Iran at the time. The American hostages were taking in Iran. And they all thought I was from Iran. And, they'll call me a variety of different names. But you know what? The number of good people have outnumbered the number of bad people by such a fraction that I will never, ever even think about that. I have made so many wonderful people. I've met so many wonderful people. I've made so many wonderful friends that I will put that in a rear view mirror and love to be a member of this community. And I would never live anywhere in the world but this place. And it comes back down to the very, very, very basic things. I keep thinking, the common denominator and the very basic human value is respect for honesty, integrity, decency, compassion, and respect for the truth. I feel like as long as we live with those fundamental human values, I believe as a society, we will be fine. But we must, remember in every society in the world, there's a battle between truth and disinformation, and truth and misinformation. And for us to be together and for us to be as one, as brothers and sisters, no matter where we came from, no matter where we grew up, no matter what religion we were, I think the common denominator is going to be, again, honesty, integrity, decency, humanity, and humility.
Well, that pretty much covered what I was going to ask you. Really, how can people be better allies for people who are of different race or ethnic backgrounds? And you basically said it right there.
Thank you. And one thing that a wise man said, that if we want to change our society for better, we'll have to start with loving those who've never been loved. So if we start loving those who've never been loved, I think we'll be a much better society.
Absolutely. Saboor Sahely, thank you so much. Yep. And all you people out there, if you have never been to Angie's, I'm telling you, it's the best food, it's the best service, it's quick. and you know how to do the restaurant business, whether you wanted to be in it or not, you know how to do it.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
I